The Eurovision Song Contest can change the world. Well, you already know that if you're a fan. It stands for tolerance, freedom, and as I'll show, even democracy. In recent years, we've had artists like Conchita Wurst and Dana International who've challenged homophobia and transphobia respectively. But did you know that in the 1970s, Eurovision sparked a revolution? One song was used as a trigger, a secret trigger, to begin a revolution to overthrow a fascist dictatorship. So Eurovision helped to overthrow fascism. The country concerned was Portugal, and on April the 25th, 1974, army captains left their barracks and went to take over government buildings, ending one of Europe's last and longest lasting fascist dictatorships. And the signal for the army captains to move into action was a Eurovision hit. It seems incredible to say it now, and I was alive as a child at the time, but both Spain and Portugal were still fascist dictatorships in the mid-1970s. These were dictatorships that started when Hitler was still in power in Germany and Mussolini in Italy. Portugal's fascist dictatorship took power a year before Hitler. But fascism came crashing down in Portugal on April the 25th, 1974, 3 weeks before the Portuguese entry to the Eurovision Song Contest hadn't done very well in terms of points. But it was going to do very well in terms of sparking a revolution. It was played on the radio by sympathisers with the forthcoming revolution as a signal to the army: leave the barracks, take over key government buildings. The song, by the way, was called O Depois do Adeus, after the farewell, and it had been performed at Brighton in the UK at the Eurovision Song Contest that year, presented by Katie Boyle. That was the year, by the way, that ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest, so Portugal never stood a chance. Now, I'm personally invested in this story because my mother was Portuguese, and I remember very clearly the revolution in Portugal. I mean, the whole country was covered in political graffiti. The army were on the streets. They were all bearded like Che Guevara, and the whole country was abuzz with revolution. So this was an incredible time for Portugal. From 1932 until he suffered a stroke in 1968 after his deck chair collapsed, António de Oliveira Salazar was the dictator of Portugal. And after him, up until the revolution, was Marcelo Caetano. Now, neither man was ever going to win a charisma contest. They weren't those kind of fascists. In fact, sometimes they're described as not having been fascists because they weren't that kind of goose-stepping and saluting Mussolini Hitler types, but they surely were fascists. There was no democracy, there was an authoritarian regime, there was a secret police, and if you dissented, you ended up in a political prison being tortured. In the 1930s, my grandfather was actually arrested after Salazar had come to power, and he was a member of something called the Republican Party, nothing to do with the American Republicans, but it was, by our standards today, it would have been a centre-right conservative party. But even that was too left-wing for the Salazar dictatorship. Up until the revolution in 1974, Portugal was fighting a massively expensive war to try and hold on to its African colonies in Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and the other smaller colonies. Now, Britain and France had given their colonies independence through the 1950s and 60s, but the fascist regime in Portugal refused to give its colonies independence and sent thousands of young men to go and fight an absolutely dreadful war in the middle of Africa. Now, I know that there are some Portuguese people who, believe it or not, are nostalgic for the primitive economy of the fascist regime from the 30s to the 70s, who don't want democracy, it would seem. Well, nuts to them. I've written a blog post about the various lies that are told by pro-Salazar, pro-Caetano people. There's a link in the description below. And unbelievably, some American conservatives are also now sympathetic to Salazar, and the same arguments apply. So then, who knew it? Eurovision really does have the power to change the world. And in 1974, it sparked a revolution.